Get out of my bed, I whispered, my voice shaking more from disbelief than fear, my fingers clutching the blanket as if it were the last boundary between my life and complete chaos. But he didn't move, not even an inch. Instead, he turned slowly, calm and infuriatingly composed, his eyes adjusting to the dim light like he belonged there. Like this wasn't the most outrageous moment of my life, and when he spoke, his voice was low, steady, and devastating. Too late. I'm your soon-to-be husband. And in that second, my entire world fractured, because this wasn't a stranger, not exactly. This was the man my father had been pushing into my life for months. The man whose name made boardrooms fall silent and whose signature decided the fate of hundreds. The man I had refused to meet properly, avoided at dinners, dismissed as another control tactic, another deal disguised as destiny, and yet here he was, in my bed, wearing yesterday's shirt like he had planned. This moment long before I ever realized I was walking into it, and as my heart thundered against my ribs, I remembered everything at once. My father's sudden illness, the company on the verge of collapse, the clause hidden deep in legal paperwork I hadn't bothered to read, the one sentence that changed everything. Marriage before the end of the quarter or total loss of control, and I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand explanations. But instead, all that came out was a broken laugh. Because life had cornered me so perfectly it almost deserved applause, and he watched me like he already knew I'd fight this. Like resistance was just another step he'd calculated. And when he finally stood, tall and unshaken, giving me space but not freedom, he said quietly, "You can hate me tonight, you can scream tomorrow, but this is happening, because whether you believe it or not, I'm the only one standing between you and everything you're about to lose." And the worst part wasn't the shock or the anger or even the fear. It was the realization that deep down I knew he was telling the truth. And as the room fell silent again, I understood that my life before this moment was over. And if you're still watching this story unfold, this is your reminder to subscribe now, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about power, love, and choice. Morning light crept into the room like an unwanted witness, exposing the reality I had hoped was just a nightmare. But he was still there. Not in my bed this time, but at the window, sleeves rolled up, phone pressed to his ear, calmly commanding markets, people, futures, like the night before hadn't happened at all. And when he noticed I was awake, he ended the call instantly, turning to me not like a conqueror, but like a man bracing for impact. And that's when the truth started spilling out, not as an apology, but as a confession, how the deal wasn't just about saving my father's company, how he had fought against the arranged marriage clause until there was no other option left, how enemies I didn't even know I had were circling, waiting for one mistake to take everything from me, and how marrying me wasn't a victory for him but a shield, one that put him directly in the line of fire. And I wanted to call him a liar, but every piece fit too well, every unexplained pressure, every sudden silence, every door that had closed without warning. And as the hours passed, the anger softened into something more dangerous. Understanding, because I saw the cost in his eyes, the loneliness of always choosing duty over desire. And when I finally asked why he hadn't just walked away, why he'd risked his name, his empire, his freedom for someone who had done nothing but push him away, his answer wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, almost afraid. Because if I didn't, you'd disappear before you ever realized how powerful you really are. And that was the moment I understood this wasn't a prison. It was a battlefield, and somehow we were on the same side, whether we liked it or not. And as I stood beside him, looking out at a city that suddenly felt smaller than my resolve, I knew this marriage wouldn't be about ownership or control. It would be about survival, growth, and maybe, if we were brave enough, love. And if the story pulled you in, surprised you, or made you feel something real, subscribe to the channel now, because this journey is just beginning, and the next chapter will go even deeper. The engagement announcement detonated like a silent bomb, not with noise but with whispers, glances, and smiles that didn't quite reach people's eyes. And as I stood beside him under crystal lights and polite applause, I realized this was the real test, not the night in my bedroom or the morning truth, but this, being watched, measured, judged by people who smelled weakness the way sharks sensed blood. And his hand rested lightly on my back, not possessive, not distant, just steady, like an anchor reminding me I wasn't standing alone. Even when questions came like daggers wrapped in silk, when investors smiled and asked about timing, When rivals laughed too loudly and congratulated us with eyes already calculating how long this union would last. And through it all he never faltered, answering calmly, confidently, never speaking for me but always leaving space for my voice. And when I finally spoke, clear, composed, unafraid, I felt something shift, not just in the room but inside myself, because for the first time I wasn't reacting to a trap, I was stepping into strategy. And later that night, when the doors closed and the masks dropped, the pressure finally exploded, not into anger but into exhaustion, into the raw honesty neither of us had allowed before, and we argued not about the deal or the marriage but about fear. His fear of losing control, mine of losing myself. And it was messy and uncomfortable and real, and somewhere between accusations and silence, something fragile but powerful formed. Trust, not blind, not romanticized, but earned inch by inch, and when danger finally showed its face. Documents leaked, stocks dipped, an old ally turned enemy. It wasn't him who shielded me while I hid behind him. It was us standing back to back, choosing to fight together. And as dawn broke over a city that no longer felt hostile but challenged, I understood this story was no longer about a woman forced into a marriage or a man executing a plan. It was about two people rewriting the rules that tried to cage them, and if you've made it this far, this is your moment. Subscribe to the channel, because the next chapter isn't just about love or power, it's about revenge, redemption, and a choice that will change everything. The first real attack didn't come with raised voices or public scandals. It came quietly, surgically, in the form of a board vote scheduled without my knowledge and contracts rewritten overnight to bleed authority from my hands. And as I stared at the documents spread across the dining table, my name still printed neatly at the top like a cruel joke, I felt that old fear claw back into my chest, the one that told me I was always a step behind, always reacting instead of leading. But this time he didn't take the papers from me or tell me what to do. He simply sat down, met my eyes and said, "What's your move?" And that single question changed everything, because for the first time someone powerful wasn't rescuing me. They were trusting me, and as the hours passed we dismantled the trap piece by piece, tracing signatures, timelines, motives, uncovering the familiar enemy hiding behind polite smiles. The same man who had smiled at our engagement and toasted to our future while sharpening knives behind our backs. And when morning came, I walked into that boardroom not as a bride, not as a pawn, but as a decision-maker, my voice steady as I laid out evidence, predicted their next 3 moves, and offered them a choice they hadn't expected. Stand with us or be exposed completely, and the silence that followed wasn't doubt. It was surrender, and later, alone again. The victory didn't feel loud or triumphant. It felt grounding, like finally standing on solid ground after years of slipping. And when he smiled at me then, not the confident public smile but something softer, prouder, I realized this marriage had crossed a line no contract could define. And if you're still watching this story unfold, subscribe now, because the final chapter will reveal the one decision neither of us can prepare for, and it will change everything.